Oh, this is terrible. You know what it is? I've got two different things going at the exact same time. Oh, I've got to mute that bugger. I was like, man, I'm hearing myself with crazy echoes right now. I don't know how that's happening. Oh yeah, lo and behold, I had a tab up with myself playing. It's that good, by the way. Ow! I hope you're super psyched. I know I am. It is Wednesday, August 31st. You are tuned in right now to the greatest show that is on right now. Anywhere in the world you tune in right now, you're not going to see anything better than this. And let me say, timely. And why do I say this? Why do I say that it's very timely that you're watching right now? Oh, simple. Because we're going to be talking about nihilism. I got to get it over here. We're going to be talking about nihilism, right? Father Seraphim wrote, talking about Satan, in fact, his program, his wicked wiles, the deceits that he uses in order to manipulate mankind. That battle that goes on between the city of man and the city of God. It's been going on for a really long time. But we don't have any fear in this situation because God's got it under control. And why? Because Christ is king right now, son. He's king right now, heaven and earth. All power, all authority right now. And that kingdom has been advancing ever since for 2,000 years. Bigger and bigger and bigger and brighter all the time. And that's what we're all about. And so what do? What you always do to a king. We take a knee. Resolving deep inside everything we've got, all our thoughts, words, and deeds to him, and then committing in our hearts. Never give up. Keep on smiling. And remember, one day, we're going to die. We are going to die. Oh, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. I don't like this setup right now. I don't feel good about this. I was with my son before the show, and I'm like, hey, you know, we can come up with something, right? We can come up with something. It sounds like it'll be good. We can move stuff around a little bit, maybe center it a little bit. I can't stand this. I can't stand it. And people may not know this. I'm ambidextrous. But most of the time, a lot of stuff, I eat with my left hand, right? I brush with my left hand, brush my hair with my left hand. I hold books with my left hand. I write with my right hand, okay? And I only do that because when I was young, I was told that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. And so I'm not sure how I feel about it. However, I will tell you, I feel really, really good. I feel awesome. Do you feel awesome? I hope so, right? Today is the day the Lord has made. Every single day we rejoice. We're glad in it. And that's what we do at PaleocratDiaries. If this is your first time tuning in and you're like, this guy is a little bit nuts, I have good reason to be. We're living through crazy times. And we're resolved in our hearts that we're going to dream bigger thoughts. We're not going to be brought down by the world all around us. We're going to stand firm in that conviction that the Lord has this under control and that he made us for a time such as this. So we get really excited. And one of the things, speaking of people who are excited, I'm really excited, and I know others were excited about the apologetic series that I'm doing for the ladies. This is a ladies exclusive in the Luna Pack. Okay, so if you're a lady and you love the show and you're sharing it with all your lady friends and you're gathering around the computer, the phone, and you're all watching with each other on a Wednesday night around this time, if that is in fact what you're doing and you say, I would love to learn how to defend the faith, then make sure to join us at the Luna Pack chat. That you can find the Telegram chat. The link is right down in the description below. The Luna Pack is a private chat just for women. And the ladies there asked if I would go ahead and help them and speak to them about apologetics, because a lot of them had questions, but the main chat, the dudes kind of dominate that. They come in, they're all blustering all over the place, right? It's a rabble in there, and they're just rambling away and not even thinking about the ladies. But your boy was. Your boy was. And I said, in fact, that's something I thought about doing. So yesterday, we went through some key intellectual sins, right? Prejudicial conjecture, unargued philosophical bias, that sort of thing. In order to spot that when you're in a conversation, we use practical examples. And we're going to do the same thing in the next episode, where we're going to talk about various formal and informal logical fallacies. Specifically the ones that come up all the time. We'll do a little bit of extra credit too, right? We'll do the ones that don't come up so frequently, but it's kind of cool that you know them. I also did a Fat Shame to Fitness program, and if you were there for that, I poured out my heart. I poured out my heart about God, about the Bible, about prayer, and it was powerful, because I've been losing weight like crazy. Super pumped. And if you'd like to lose weight too, if you're sick and tired of being a fat slob, and I'm sure that you are. And if you're not, shame on you, right? If you're like, I like being fat, how dare you? I dare it. I dare it. I double dog dare it all the time. Queen of all double dogs, because I created something called #FatShameToFitness, and people are losing weight. And people are excited because they're praying, they're reading their scripture, they're connecting with other great people, and all the while, they're losing weight. Right? Learning to take care of their lives. Speaking of taking care of your lives, we're going to go ahead and play the SAINTMAKER ad real quick. As soon as that's over, we'll be right back. We're going to get right into the book Nihilism. This is, I think, the 6th or 7th video of the series. There's going to be a bunch of folders that you're going to find. I said it would be over on my personal YouTube. I got the AOK from Mr. Flanders to have it over at Meaning of Catholic. So you're going to be able to find at Meaning of Catholic any of the series that we've done on any of the books and topics that we've done. You are going to see a boatload of really awesome videos that are lined up, made easy for you. But today it's going to be this one. So if you have everything set and you have your coffee, we'll be back in 90 seconds. Getting right into the book, Nihilism. Again, you're watching PaleocratDiaries on the Wednesday, August 31st edition. Can a personal planner really make you a saint? Not by itself. But in our day and age of addictive apps and glowing screens, we're bombarded by constant distraction, and our quest for sainthood often takes a backseat. The SAINTMAKER is the first high-performance planner for the spiritual life, made by faithful Catholics for faithful Catholics. It's a work of genius, really, fusing the wisdom of the saints with the science of personal productivity. It's rigorous, but sainthood is tough, and most of us need help organizing our time, our work, our leisure, and our devotion, because that can help you become a saint. The SAINTMAKER is elegant, fits in your purse or briefcase, and is a perfect companion for your missal, Bible, or rosary. Published 4 times per year, each season includes daily planning pages, feast days, and devotions for both forms of the liturgical calendar, goal-setting pages, confession journals, and more. It's why the SAINTMAKER is used by hardworking Catholics like CEO of Sock Religious Scott Williams, best-selling author Sam Guzman, YouTubers like Amber Schneider, a Catholic wife Dina Barca and Brian Holdsworth, and priests like Father Corey Stitcha. Try the SAINTMAKER out, and if you decide that it's not for you, you can send it back for a full refund within 90 days. So go right now. Find your life planner at thesaintmaker.com. Quantities are limited though, so head on over to thesaintmaker.com to order yours and to start your SAINTMAKER journey today. You gotta do it over there, thesaintmaker.com/PaleocratDiaries. It's a way, in fact, to support the show. It is. And you will get a really fancy edition. This is actually really bright red, but I have the teal and orange LUT on here right now. Speaking of on here right now, you may be hearing that sound. That is the clarion call. That is the PaleocratDiaries alert system. That is the way that we let everybody know, all of the folks, all the freaks and geeks all around the world, that your boy, Jeremiah Bannister, the Paleocrat, is on the air, and that we're going to enter the octagon of history. We're going to enter the octagon, in fact, of right now. The octagon of present day, to get a better understanding for what is this nonsense going on. It's clown world. It is totally clown world. We're surrounded by it. We're surrounded by the fanatics. We're surrounded by the esoteric and the occultic. We're surrounded by all of these individuals that have no moral compass whatsoever, and yet they're coming after you. They're coming after me, that's for sure. And they want to ruin you. They want to wreck you. They see that cross. They see those hands. They see scripture. Oh, son, you're done. So what do we got to do? We have to analyze it, understand the hellscape that we have walked into, because we were born into this. We were born for this. And if you don't believe that, get on your knees and ask God to compel you to do that. Say, God, infuse right now. Infuse within me the kind of grace and illumination that I need right now to face the world and to recognize that I'm beautifully and wonderfully made, with a great intention, remarkable vision, our first cause, our final cause, and all the way through, like a javelin in the Lord's hand, and he just chucked it. And he knows where he wants it to go. And you're part of that. You're along for the ride, booking through the sky, that javelin, whoa! So get out that guitar, get out the drums, get out the harpsichord, right? Get out all of that little synth thing that they use on Napoleon Dynamite. My son's got one. And let everybody know, crank it up loud. Let everybody know that you're tuning in, because you're resolved to give it your best every single moment of every single day. Oh, man. Whew. I'm totally psyched out of my mind. I don't even have coffee. I have juice right now. I have juice. I feel guilty saying straight to the dome with some juice. And it's sugar-free. It's sugar-free juice. How can I say straight to the dome when there's no caffeine, there's no sugar, no nothing, just flavored water? I feel it, guys. I really feel it. No, I've been trying to get to bed at a decent time. Because I'm trying to be a productive guy. Believe it or not, right? Believe it or not, it's Kaiser time all the time. But I am a very busy man. Okay, speaking of busy, right? The world has us all sorts of busy, doesn't it? The world has us all sorts of busy, always on our toes, always on our heels, people up against the ropes all the time, and really frustrated about it, feeling like there's no hope. Well, I'm here to tell you, there is. And part of it is that, number one, obviously the Lord is in control. But more than that, we are believers, and we are part of the church. And as such, it just happens to work out this way regularly. It's, a matter of the Holy Ghost and such within our lives and within the institution. But we have the kind of wisdom and foresight and tradition that, when fused together in a harmony, allow us to see the anatomy of that sinful worldview, to see the blueprints of the enemy before he's even made his move, because we know that he's a liar. And we know that drive is always pushing into nothingness, into the void, into the abyss. We know it. And yet we also know that as beings created in the image of God, we can't even think of such things. We are stuck thinking of things insofar as we think. We have object, we have subject, we have relation, we have idea together all the time. We cannot, in fact, think of nothing without making nothing something. So even when the devil is pushing, right? The devil is pushing toward that void, pushing toward that nothingness. It's always going to have a program. And that program is going to be adopted and advanced by people in a way that they think that it's a positive, most of them. You have some obvious weirdos. You have some obvious, complete maniacal, diabolical folks. I mean, that's true. And those people definitely are not, they're down with the sickness. They're like, oh yeah, we know it's evil. We don't care. that sort of thing. It's kind of rare, to be honest. A lot of times, even those scumbags, they're messed up. Their conscience is seared, but they're still under the impression that that evil that's done is for a greater good, right? And so stepping stones, people don't like being stepping stones, but that's the way they view it. That's the way they view it. So, the Nihilist Program. We are now on chapter 6, okay? War against God. Issuing in the proclamation of the reign of nothingness, which means the triumph of incoherence and absurdity, the whole plan presided over by Satan, this, in brief, is the theology and the meaning of nihilism. But man cannot live by such blatant negation. Unlike Satan, he cannot even desire for it, right, for its own sake, but only by mistaking it for something positive and good. That's along the same lines of what I said. And in fact, no nihilist, apart from a few moments of frenzy and enthusiasm, I have to believe that he had in mind the kind of enthusiasm that we are familiar with on this show, right? That kind. Or perhaps despair, has ever seen his negation as anything but a means to a higher goal. Again, stepping stones. Stepping stones. Nihilism furthers its satanic ends by means of a positive program. And in this regard, we are going to be talking about revolutionaries. Revolutionaries that dream of this new world order, this new way of looking at things, this new way of, and when I say looking at things, I mean everything. That they are going to look at this, they are going to transform, translate, right? Everything, retranslate it, reinterpret it, to detach it from the meaning and the grounding and the roots that it has had in Christian soil, because it's in antithesis to the destruction of the old world order. The content of the nihilist dream is then a quote-unquote positive one. But truth requires that we view it in a proper perspective. So let's think about this. Let's think about what exactly is the destruction of the old order. What is that? How will it be done? The first and most obvious item in the program of nihilism is the destruction of the old order, because it was the soil nourished by Christian truth in which men had their roots, its laws, institutions, even its customs. I would say customs, even courtesies. It was the entirety, in fact, of the way that we lived and the way that we moved and the way that we had our being. It impacted that to various degrees over time, but it impacted that because it's a worldview, because it's something that was believed, even if imperfectly and imprecisely applied, understood and applied. It was still the idea that that is going to sanctify those things in your life, and those things in your life would include not just your private life in your heart, but also in the way that you behave, the way that your cities are structured, the way that you have art, what you accept as appropriate language or appropriate attire, how it affects your laws, how it affects the curriculum at your schools, where you even have your school. All these things, okay? It's buildings, right? A visible sign of his order upon the earth. I've said this before. About you can see it in the skyline. That you used to have a day and age where, this is one thing. If people say, well, what can we do? Go find a place where, you can imagine a town, where you can imagine something and say, look, I can imagine a community here. And step far enough away, get in your car, do whatever you got to do, get far enough away to look at the skyline at night, and then do it again in the morning. And envision in both times, a steeple, envision a cross high in the sky above the shadows and the shapes of houses and buildings. But that cross, in fact, would be what towers over all the rest. Because what we see in the skyline is a definitive staple of our society. And we've been long out of that place where the staple of our society was the cross. That's been a long time. That's not new, right? And we've talked about the misconceptions that a lot of people have regarding, when this all began and how this all began. And a lot of people kind of like to pinpoint it with, taking God out of public schools, prayer out of schools, things like that. And we went back further. We went back and talked about it through the lens of Charles Taylor's secular age. And one of those things was talking about the kind of culture, the kind of high culture that when they imagine as they're approaching on their wagon and they're approaching, or on their horse, they're approaching the city, that in the city, the tallest building has a cross. And it's the church. And the ones around it are the businesses and then the homes. But there was a reason why the steeple was so high. There's a reason why they would find the highest point in the area and put churches there. Even the generally primitive, quote unquote, but natural living conditions, right, served unintentionally as a reminder of man's humble place here, his dependence upon God for even the few earthly blessings he possessed, and of his true home, which lies beyond this veil of tears. It's so true. Even the humble homes that we had, the idea of, a cottage, the idea of a small plot of land, a family farm, the simple life, having those things that you need, investing in the future, that sort of a thing, whether it's family, whether it's your goods and services, the savings that you've made from that, expanding, right? Expanding the boundaries and the borders. That's not to say you got to be dirt broke, but it is to say there is something about the idea that it's a weird thing when people complain about consumerism, and especially, Christmas, stuff like that. And yet if we go into their house, go into mine, you can see consumerism all around. The clutter, the mess, everywhere. The number of things that you've got to decide, am I going to throw that away? Am I going to give it away, throw it away? What am I going to do? And you don't know. And it's boxes and boxes and bags full of it. And then we sit there and we judge other people. And then we wonder why they don't turn it off during a holiday, that because all of that has primed many individuals to crank it up to, 5,000 and end up punching each other for toys. Strangling, how dare you? And they're strangling somebody over a toy. We've lost track of where our real home is. We've lost track. It is here that a a very peculiar nihilist virtue of violence comes into play. Yeah, note to self. You ever see that word in your life? Practice it a lot. It's a word you say 1 billion times, Jeremiah. Violence is no merely incidental aspect of the nihilist revolution, but in fact is part of its essence. According to Marxist dogma, force, and this is a quote, force is the midwife of every old society pregnant with a new one. Appeals to violence and even a kind of ecstasy at the prospect of its use abound in revolutionary literature. It's totally true. I have talked before, I used to have a promo that began every show that was a bunch of highlights from different programs I'd been on, interviews, things like that, or segments of my show, because I used to be 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, right, over at Holy Faith Media. I kind of miss that a little bit, doing shows that frequently, or more regularly than I do now. But the thing is, I did a segment one day where I was talking about the model of civilizational rise and demise that I embrace. And part of that is, in fact, kind of what they're saying, that there comes a point as a civilization is in decline, in that lifespan of the birth of a high culture, and then becoming transforming into civilization and economic man, and then people of politics, power politics, in fact. And as that happens, and all of those things that transpire in that meantime, that cause that demise, right? That like the dross in the gold or the water in the wine, inflation, the tampering of money, fractional reserve type stuff. That when that sort of thing happens, imperialism, the inclusion of chariots, right? Weapons of war that are aggressive and offensive, right? That are going out rather than purely defensive. Those sorts of things are signs and indicators, right, of a societal decline. You start seeing things about morals, the changing of morals. The more you go out imperially, the more you're going to end up having people from all different religions, all different cultures, all different ways of life, different histories, different languages. You're going to have different customs and courtesies, heroes and saints, villains, entirely different world and life views. And the more those come in, the more abstract your connection has to be. But people aren't really like that. People really do believe what they believe. And they desire to be around others who believe like them. And it's difficult. They can, in the abstract, say, oh, I love hanging out with people different than me. Maybe, but to debate, maybe to debate people, maybe to try to convince them that you're right about X, Y, and Z, but even then you're still in an effort to make more people like you. And so the idea being that when all these things happen, right, it affects language, borders, all of it, and you have a civilization begin to decline, that balkanized state that you have ends up being all sorts of rupture all over the place, divisions left and right, and it's volatile, right? It's hot, super, super hot, lava hot, hotter than the lava that your kid imagines when you play Don't Step on the Lava. And that's really hot, okay? Hotter than that. And it's waiting for a spark. It's waiting for that time where you will have enough power, right, within the bosom of the host, enough power politically that if it were to spark, you would be able to have some kind of a movement where people would feel obliged and or compelled to join you or oppose you. And at that point, you have some serious, serious revolution on your hands. Okay? And you can see the buildup to that sort of thing right now. I've been saying for a long time, and it's gotten me in trouble a little bit. a little eatser, right? But the idea, scholars, academics have said this. There are papers on this. You can go to Hillsdale, for example, the Imprimis. You can go there to read about this, what's called a cold civil war, where that fabric in society has so separated, it's gotten so far apart and so thin, so fragile, so arbitrary, so vain, so meaningless, so ambiguous. It's been pulled and pulled and pulled until you can see through it, and parts of it are snapping left and right, and it's hanging on by a thread. Okay? In that place, you now have just rival blocks of worldviews, and those groups are forming by number and by political, economic, and cultural influence. It's wicked bad. And we're there now. And you're seeing, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, you're seeing how this plays out. A lot of you watching are probably more familiar with how this plays out on the left. But it plays out on the right too. And it's because, if you can learn something from this episode, I hope you can learn a lot, but reimagine for a moment, right? And then choose that moment forever to say, reimagine for yourself the spectrum of the left-right dialectic. trash it. Instead, imagine and envision a horseshoe. And that the far left, if you were to get it warmed up, heat it up, right? Maybe if it's cool and it bends back, you've got yourself far ends. But when it's hot, right, and that metal begins to bend, it gets really close. And when it gets really close, you end up having the far end of the left and the far end of the right end up being closer to each other than apart. Okay? And you'll see things, similarities between them. It's strange enough that they hate each other, but if you understand the nihilist dialectic that we've gone through, the various phases of that, and recognize that within that dialectic, within that progression in time and space, how nihilism has fleshed itself out over time, that there were rival schools, and those rival schools would genuinely oppose each other. But their underlying assumptions, their most ruling assumptions about life, about the world, about right and wrong, those things are more alike than we initially may admit because of what we see. We're deceived, in fact, by what we see. Our eyes, again, play tricks on us. And by the time we figure it out, it's normally way too late. Lenin defined the dictatorship of the proletariat. He defined it as, quote, a domination that is untrammeled by law and based on violence, end quote. Demagogic. Incitement of the masses and the arousing of the basest passions for revolutionary purposes. These have long, in fact, been the standard nihilistic practice. The spirit of violence has been most thoroughly incarnated, right, in our century by the nihilist regimes of Bolshevism and National Socialism. There we have it again. People would say, well, wait a second. It was like major opposition here. Major opposition. These folks didn't like each other. To this day, they would believe that they are most opposed. You go find yourself a commie and ask who they want to punch in the face, and I think you know who. Anyone that they describe as a fascist. Anyone they describe as a Nazi, which of course now at this point includes a bazillion people. In fact, if you were to ask them for their definition, and they were to begin, if they even ventured to give you a definition, that definition would probably apply to almost everybody in every state, in every nation that has ever lived. Until modern times. Until modern times. Yeah. And if you go on the other side, and you get in conversations, and we have them sometimes. We'll have people come into the chat talking about old mustache man, making a case for old mustachio guy. And you're like, dude, bro, you can agree with certain concepts, but you don't got to go down that road. Look, I've read some Father Pesch. I know about the ethics in the national economy, the church in the national economy. I've read some encyclicals, right? I know what the church has taught in the past about political economy and various cultural ideas. I understand that. But to go down certain roads, but no matter what, for them to position themselves as if it was just the great opponent of communism, you can grant that. You can grant that and say, oh yeah, you guys totally hated each other. And at the same time, both of them are part of the nihilist dialectic. They're both part of it. The two, whatever their psychological dissimilarities and the historical accidents which place them in opposing camps, have been partners in their frenzied accomplishment of this task. Right? Take Nazism. Nazism had another more obvious and direct function. Goebbels explained this function in his radio broadcast in the last days of the war. Okay, here's a quote. The bomb terror spares the dwellings of neither rich nor poor. Before the labor offices of total war, the last class barriers have had to go down. Together with the monuments of culture, there crumble also the last obstacles to the fulfillment of our revolutionary task. Now that everything is in ruins, we are forced to rebuild Europe. In the past, private possessions tied us to a bourgeois restraint. Now the bombs, instead of killing all Europeans, have only smashed the prison walls which kept them captive. In trying to destroy Europe's future, the enemy has only succeeded in smashing its past. And with that, everything old and outworn has gone. End quote. Thus destroyed the old order, and thus cleared the way for the building of the new. They're both part of the dialectic. And we can see the same thing in the modern examples of the left-right dialectic that we embrace now. People, there's an intuitive sense about this, right? That people, they feel like they're always beating their head against a wall. And they're like, man, you know, I'm pushing for this idea. I'm pushing for this thing. And there are monumental victories at times. And yet for some reason, it feels like even those things are within an overall program that is continuing and continuing and continuing to march on. One that does not care what we believe. One that does not care. And people feel like they're hopeless. They're helpless. They don't know what to do. They give up on any kind of solution. There's no political solution. That's a very popular phrase right now. And it might actually be somewhat true. The idea of starting at the ground and working up, we are at a scale, because of civilization, we are at a scale that is superstructure. So you have small areas. Someone can say, I'm going to run. Take this as an example. Somebody could say, I'm going to run for the school board. I've got a buddy who's doing that. I have a buddy in Kentucky. He's running for the school board down there. It's a difficult thing. Why? Well, one reason why is because the way that the unions are set up, the way that they've entrenched themselves, the kind of worldview, the ideas regarding education, the ideas regarding the very purpose and aim and means of the institution itself is way, way beyond how it began. It was easy to infiltrate when you're busting into a small church house school. That's one thing. You get in there, you got a couple people you got to convince. Now, massive bureaucracy. Massive. In fact, in that way, it's a deep state. What I mean by that, same as the deep state for federal government, same for the deep state, almost anywhere at this point, because we're in a bureaucratic state. And this is bad for nihilism because it just keeps the program going. The idea is that it creates a kind of stability, which in former times might have been not too bad. It seemed like a good thing, wouldn't it? It's not so topsy-turvy. You're not 1 minute going to be one thing and the next minute another, because all of the various mechanisms are in place and they're operating regardless of what you think. But what happens when that's infected? What happens when that is infected by nihilism? This satanic worldview. What happens? And what happens when people who've been infected by it don't even realize it? They don't even realize the role that they play. If you talk to them about it, they might even have an opposition to it, and yet not even realize that they're useful idiots in the program. The making of the new earth. But we do not yet have to do with the ultimate future, right? Not yet. With the end of the revolution. Between the revolution of destruction and the earthly paradise, there lies a stage of transition. In Marx's doctrine, this is known as, quote, the dictatorship of the proletariat. In this stage, we may see a second constructive function of violence. Do you think right now that you are seeing a little bit of that right now? Do you think? I think so. Because the violence that we're seeing is all being portrayed as constructive, defended by people in the highest places of power. And when it happens on the other side, right, let's say the right, so you have waves of violence that come out from the left, waves of it. In the streets, fires, cop cars flipped over, crazy nonsense, people traveling from all over the place, sparking in one, then another, then another, then another, then another, and it just spreads like a disease. It's defended by people. They're like the circumcellions to the Donatists. Not necessarily the greatest thing to have the monkey on your back. It's an elephant in the room, but it's an elephant. It's an elephant. You kind of like that it's on your side. And so you don't want to push too hard. And in some cases, every once in a while, you want to end up really pushing them. Like Maxine Waters level, pushing. That sort of thing. But then when the right finally does it, and you see things that would otherwise be inexcusable, there's a sense of fairness, which is weird to me. That's a weird thing that goes on. It's American as apple pie. It's American as General Tao's chicken. And that might actually be more American than apple pie. Okay. But that doesn't mean that it's right wing, doesn't mean that it's Christian, religious, in any sense. It's a terrible ethic. To say, well, yeah, but there's other people, they do it all the time. We don't let our kids get away with that logic, and yet we're using that at some of the highest levels with the biggest stakes. It shows the bankruptcy of the party system, the bankruptcy, right, of a lot of activist organizations, and the bankruptcy of a lot of individual American people. So you end up having a wicked kind of thing, both sides playing into this. And rather than saying, it's not about fairness, it's about doing the right thing. Instead, they're falling prey to that, which is incidentally continuing the program. Incidentally advancing that program and adding steam, adding coal to the engine. And it just keeps trucking along. Realists everywhere envisage a totally new order, built entirely by men liberated from the yoke of God, and upon the ruins of an old order whose foundation was divine. A new, purely human kingdom. A new earth, exploited, controlled, organized for the sake of man and against the true God. No place is secure from the encroaching empire of this nihilism. Everywhere, men feverishly pursue the work of progress. For what reason? They don't know. They do not know, or only very dimly do they sense it. In the free world, it is perhaps the horror vacui that chiefly impels men into feverish activity that promises forgetfulness of the spiritual emptiness that attends all worldliness. People are in the rat race, and they don't even know why. They don't even know why. Right? They're not investing. They're not saving. They're not building something. They're not thinking ahead. It's all for the moment. Live for today. They're living in this crazy world where, on the one hand, being created in the image of God, there is something within you that has a purpose and an aim. It's why you were created. It's why you're called to be in the likeness. Not just the image, but the likeness. And yet, we kick against the goats. But that doesn't always flesh itself out as being lazy. Sometimes it fleshes it out as having enormous amounts of wealth, enormous amounts of work. Working yourself all the way down to the bone, right? And yet if you ask, what ultimately is this for? It might be a vague idea, maybe the residue of something from a long time ago, a reasoning, a logic that made sense in days gone by. But does it now? It's a cold, inhuman world that men without God are fashioning. A world where there are everywhere organizations of efficiency and nowhere love or reverence. The sterile purity and functionalism. By the way, just as a reminder, this was written, what, in the 60s? Come on now. Of contemporary architecture are a typical expression of such a world. The same spirit is present in the disease of total planning. We've taken that to another level. In birth control, in the welfare state. Some of the apologies for such schemes approach perilously near a strange kind of lucid insanity, wherein precision of detail and technique are united to an appalling insensitivity to the inhuman end these schemes serve. World Economic Forum much? I mean, seriously. The Great Reset? The Great Reset much? Wouldn't this be describing, in fact, the Great Reset? Wouldn't that be what this is? And the way that they've talked about what you'll own or not own, what you're going to eat, how you're going to live. These super wealthy people with a bunch of time to think about all of the terrible things that they're going to do with your money and with you, with your family, with your children, with your land. They have nothing better to do. And they believe that this is providing a really good thing. They write books about it. Put it in the stores. They're totally unafraid. They wear it on their sleeve. They have conventions. Every once in a while there'll be a little bit of shame, but only after the fact. They are aloof to it. They are aloof to this. Yeah. And again, it's talking about wiping everything old out, wiping it all out. Clean slate, all the way. The Great Reset. Yes, the Great Reset. Push that button. It's like a Nintendo game. Remember that? You could just push reset when it would kind of freeze up, and it made everything work even better. And you could blow in the video game and then put it back just in the right way. So you push, it's a little bit of difficulty, but when you finally do it and you push reset, it's going to glow at you, and it's going to be great. All the glitches will be out. It's a great reset. What a joke. Nihilist organization. Organizing. It's total, by the way. Total transformation of the earth and society by machines, modern architecture and design. A consequence of the unqualified acceptance of the industrialism and technology. People should go back and read the Rebel Agrarians. They should go back and read the 12 Southerners, right? To read some of those old agrarian minds, some of the distributists. Go back and read it. They predicted this kind of stuff. And you'll have, look, you got plenty of individuals who are just blind to it, who see every single one of these things, every single new advancement as just inherently good. Inherently. What may seem harmless in philosophical pragmatism and skepticism becomes something else again in the hands of the planners. For if there is no truth, power knows no limit, save that imposes, right, by the medium in which it functions. So whatever medium it's in, the amount of power you can have in that medium is going to be the max. What's the primary medium that they have power over you and over me? You do not have to go far. You're looking at it. You're listening to it right now. In the digital world, the more time that you spend on devices, the more devices that you have, the more you become connected, as they know and as they plan for you to do. The more you become connected in that way, the more power that they're going to wield over you, the more powerless you'll feel, and the more you will begin to tell yourself that none of it matters, that there's nothing you can do. It's a pitiful excuse for being mindless. It is. It's a pitiful excuse for mindlessly going about your day and just taking every new thing. People put thought into it when they go and buy new stuff, but not when they question it. Not when they say, do I actually need that? Is that actually, what are the consequences of incorporating that into my life that maybe I didn't think about? Because they have a sales pitch to you. Do you think that they're going to put on there the consequences? How many people would say, oh, for every cell phone that's sold, there should be some kind of a thing on there that says this may have a very negative impact on your health, on your psychological and spiritual well-being, on the management of your time. This may ruin your idea of conversation. It might, in fact, make you terribly antisocial, difficult to focus for any amount of time. But these things are true. These things are true. And it boils down to me and to you. But the people know. They know. They know that most individuals simply don't think about it, and they're not even pressured. The idea of shame, that the gentle kind of shame, the shame that says, dude, bro, hey, look, I have this, I feel this way toward a lot of incels, to be quite frank. I do. As a man, I sit there and I say, unless you're a monk, or unless you're a hermit, or unless you're going to be a priest, there is no pride in that. Are you going to take some kind of a vow? Is that what you're doing? If so, stop calling yourself an incel. There's no reason for that. You would be something different. But if you aren't, and you're 30 years old, and you're not making babies and advancing the cause, and you have nothing else, and you're not even trying, you just chalked it up as, girls suck, man. Yeah, girls are like wicked bad. All of them are just so terrible. I can't find any good ones in the world. What a bunch of garbage. You know how many awesome girls, right, are in the universe, dude? Do you know how many? That's a person who shoots themselves in the foot. I'm not going to say that's good. Especially when we are called, in fact, to discern our vocation. And they can go back to Lasance. Say, hey, look, discern your vocation. Are you going to be a monk? No. You going to be a hermit? You're not going to do that? Are you going to dedicate your life as a celibate? You can start calling yourself just that, instead of a politically and culturally driven term, a religious one, because it's the result of your discernment of your vocation. Otherwise, you need to do the right thing and follow saintly examples in the scripture even, of dudes who had to leave their family and their towns in order to find the ladies. And also accept that there are at times differences between dudes and ladies, especially when dudes find themselves on the political fringe and the religious fringe. A lot of times they're exclusive, for example, about the Latin Mass, exclusivist, right? They say, I will not go to any other kind of, I'm not going to go to the English Mass, right? I may not even go to a diocese. Okay, you are now a subset, right? And I'm not saying that arguments for that are bad. I'm saying you are admittedly a subset now. If you then go and say, I also take a position regarding ladies and work and voting and other things, you're now a subset of a subset. And then if you say, I also kind of believe, in like monarchy and stuff, subset of a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset, at that point, good luck finding a girl. Good luck. But that says something. Anyway, I digress. But we have this sterile purity and functionalism in our world, especially now, right? With the old karunkadunk, the ninja wearing costume party has gone on for years now. People would like to just keep on going with that costume. But the way purity, right? The way that functionalism, right? Looking at everything purely as that. Welfare state. The power of contemporary planners finds its natural limits. So if you're in this world and you are caught up in a digital domain, you are ultimately, the more and more and more that happens, the more that you are integrated into that Ready Player One styled stuff, the more that you are into that, and that becomes not just a digital reality, but the bulk of your day, the bulk of your waking day. Once that's happened, to that degree, power in that way, in that world, in that medium, is able to be wielded over you, over your family, over the institutions that you're involved with. In the nihilist new earth, all human energy is to be devoted to worldly concerns. The whole human environment and every object in it are to serve the cause of production and to remind men that their only happiness lies in this world. The artificial world, erected by men who will to remove the last vestige of divine influence in the world and the last trace of faith in men, promises to be so all-encompassing and so omnipresent that it will be all but impossible for men to see, to imagine, or even to hope for anything beyond it. This world, from the nihilist point of view, will be one of perfect realism, total liberation. In actual fact, it will be the vastest and most efficient prison men have ever known. The Panopticon. The Panopticon, this idea, right? How do we have a prison, for example, where you're able to keep track of the prisoners at all times? Right? Different models. You'd have one where there would kind of be there'd be a cylinder in the middle, okay? And a cylindrical shape, and people would be all around it. There'd be a circle around it. And that way, you could be in the middle at any given time. People could be seated and stationed so that in front of them, in their view, at any given time, you would be able to see the activities of individuals, and there'd be nobody around any corners. And the idea was you wouldn't even need to be within the center point because everybody around thinks that you are. And because they are afraid that you are, it will influence what they do. It has what's called the chilling effect. Okay? So this happens a lot on social media. This happens a lot when people are afraid to tell people what they really believe. They're afraid that they're going to get censored. They're afraid that they're going to end up getting deplatformed, that they're going to get a strike. I made a joke when I came on here, and I don't know, tell me, is there anything up there yet talking about the New World Order? Is there anything down below at all? I'd be surprised if there wasn't at some point. But the idea being that, look, that people are afraid if they talk about certain things that they're going to get deplatformed. I had a guy recently talking to me about Freemasons on Twitter, getting in a big debate with me about it. Act like I didn't care about it. And sitting there, when obviously this guy, you have to be familiar with my work to even know this. It's unreal. But the thing is that he was afraid to talk about it. Afraid to be very clear about what he believes is going on. I wasn't afraid of that. But I also know that there's a possibility I could get booted. But I have to make a choice. So do you. So did that guy. He's a nice guy, by the way. Nothing against the guy, right? Legitimate disagreement. I think on his part, I think it's a misunderstanding. And if I misspoke in a video, I misspoke. But the idea being that you have a choice to make. That you're either going to recognize that they have power over you because you're participating in the medium. They have power over you, but you have a choice that you can either continue doing as you wish and as you desire and as you believe is right and true and good. Or you can keep quiet. You can figure out workarounds. I do that with Karunkadunk and the ninja masks. I don't have to say any words that might possibly get me in trouble. But it is what I'm talking about. There are certain topics, right? I use the word, for example, on this show, I use the word Nazi. I use the word Freemason. I said New World Order. All of these things because without those things, this wouldn't make sense. This is all around us, ravaging our homes, ravaging our families, ravaging our church. We need to talk about it. We need to say it. We need to say it. Trying to see this chat real quick. But that's a decision that we have to make. And if we say enough is enough is enough is enough is enough, or are we going to continue going around and continue acting as though we can keep it down quiet, we can keep it to ourselves, afraid of the Panopticon that's always watching us, and we know for a fact that it is. I've mentioned it before. We know it's a proven fact that your phone knows more about you than you probably do. It knows when you wake up. It knows how many hours of sleep that you've gotten. It knows when you begin being active on your phone, how long you're active, when you're active, what you're looking at, what your interests are, how many pictures you've got, the names of the people in your life. The recall on your phone is much better than yours. That's why we rely on it. We don't even remember the numbers. The phone stores it. Anyone in the world who would have access to data about you. That's why it's weird to me. People get into this thing where they're like, I think somebody's like on the other end of the phone, like listening and like on a party line. And there's a party line and people are like just spying on you and junk. And that's how they know. And all of a sudden you got something, you got a message. Or not a message. You end up seeing an ad on Facebook. But you didn't go and talk to people about it. You probably looked it up. To be frank, you probably looked it up. Because most people, when they think of something, what do? Even when it's stupid. They could be watching something, watching a movie, and they see some actor who's like in the background. Oh, do you see that guy? He was in the background. No, sweetheart, I didn't. I think that guy was on that one movie we saw that one time. Remember? It wasn't that good. Hold on, let me see here. I got to look up this movie and see if I can see maybe and scroll through all the people and then go and look at him and try to cross-reference. That's what we do. For what? How many more important things? And this is important because it's the fashioning of the new man. The destruction of the old order, however, and the organization of the new earth are not the only items in the historical program of nihilism. They are not perhaps even its most important items. They are but the preparation for a work more significant and more ominous than either: the transformation of man. The transformation of man. That's what it's about. And it's already happened. It was already happening by the 60s, by the way. It was already happening in the 60s. The idea that we are going to become a higher humanity. They've already got it in the icons. The icons, the symbolism of civilization, the symbolism of Darwinism. You have this ascendancy. You have this idea. You can hear it in debates where people, everyday folks, ranging from everyday folks all the way up to scholars, who sit there and they will use the argument when asking about morals that we've gotten better and it's connected to evolution. They might even recognize later the various fallacies kind of wrapped up in that. But the truth is, there's something that we see that progression, and we identify with that progression that gets bigger, more controlled, more dominion over the land. And the idea is we are the pinnacle. And yet we're changing because everything's in a state of flux. Because there is no, the teleology, right, of existence, all of this stuff, gone. That it's made for an aim, it's made for a purpose, with something in mind, driving toward that final end, driving toward the goal. In fact, that those questions are even silly. Because you never know what's coming. Nature is the god of surprises to the Darwinist. And this is forged, of course, through creative violence. Marx and Engels are unequivocal on this. Quote, both for the production on a mass scale of this communist consciousness and for the success of the cause itself, the alteration of men on a mass scale is necessary. An alteration which can only take place in a practical movement, a revolution. This revolution is necessary, therefore, not only because the ruling class cannot be overthrown in any other way, but also because the class overthrowing it can only in a revolution succeed in ridding itself of all the muck of ages and become fitted to found society anew. A practical movement. That's one of those things. That's one of those things that the devil had to cringe at a little. On the one hand, it's paradoxical. On the one hand, right, you would say, well, if it's practical, then you are able to put together a whole bunch of the wickedness. And you go, but that'd be, yeah, in one way, yes. On the other hand, it's not pure chaos. And we already mentioned it can't be. Right? This is an example of it. Right? Practical ways. Things that we can do, the everyday Johnny Q, the everyday Sally Sue. That's one of the reasons why I feel called, in fact, to this apostolate to primarily focus on that group of people. Any counter-revolution, right? A counter-revolutionary movement, right? The movement itself is not revolutionary. That it's countering that. You're going to have multiple levels. There's a book, Action. Is it Jean Osset? How would you pronounce that name? French, right? And it's called Action. And in that book, I think it's an excellent blueprint. I think it's one of many that is quite excellent on what Catholic people can do in order to wage effective warfare as Catholics against this sort of drive, this nihilist spirit in the world. That sort of thing. But to be there for everyday folks, to be able to communicate with them in practical ways, to help them to see the world around them, to better understand themselves, to better understand their predicament, and to be better equipped with the tools necessary, not just to defend their faith, but to live it. It's why we talk about devotion here. It's why we talk about licence. It's why we talk about enthusiasm. That's why we talk about St. Francis de Sales. That's why. In fact, it's why we talked about how not to be secular. It's, in fact, why we talk about everything that we talk about. Some of it, there's an overlap. There's an intersection. The interest would also include your hoity-toities, right? Your hoity-toity crowd. But by and large, wanting to put these tools into the hand to equip, to embolden, to enliven people, Johnny Q's and Sally Sue's in the Catholic pews. It is, of course, no secret to contemporary philosophers and psychologists that man himself is changing. Under the influence, of course, not only of war and revolution, but also of practically everything else that lays claim to being modern and progressive. We've already cited the most striking forms of nihilist vitalism, whose cumulative effect has been to uproot, disintegrate, and to mobilize the individual, to substitute for his normal stability and rootedness a senseless quest for power and movement, and to replace normal human feeling by a nervous excitability. The work of nihilist realism, in practice, as in theory, has been paralleled and complementary to that of vitalism. A work of standardization, specialization, simplification, mechanization, dehumanization. Its effect has been to reduce the individual to the most primitive and basic level. A slave of his environment, the perfect workman, a worldwide factory. A worldwide factory. And it's one of those things. You can go through each one and think, look at the way, the constant drive to perfect those, standardizing things, specializing, simplification, mechanization, dehumanization, reducing people by saying, empowering and mobilizing. Those are popular phrases, in fact. Right? You're empowered. You're mobilized. I use the word empowered. And yet we're talking about something that has God within. Not something that is just purely this random, chaotic void. Saying, oh, everything's in the chaos. Everything's in the flow of the flux. Everything's in a state of potentiality. Everything's in a state of becoming. The problem is that a few even of those who realize this much have any real awareness of its profound significance and implications, for these are theological, and so completely outside the scope of any merely empirical analysis, or of a possible remedy, for that must be of the spiritual order. It's one of those things we've talked about a lot here. You know, I said that when people say there's no political solution, that's coming from a paradigm that is not very robustly Catholic, to be honest. For one, why would somebody even believe that was the case as a Catholic? Secondly, to the extent that politics is involved as a solution, our Lord is involved. And a lot of these people, I don't think any of them would intentionally say that our Lord is strapped and biting his nails up in heaven, really hoping things work out. I guess the New World Order's got the best of us. Dang it. Oh, shucks. I died on the cross and such, and resurrected, and I ascended into heaven, and I'm seated at the right hand of the Father. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, I just can't really do anything about space and time. I'm only the God of history. They wouldn't say that. And yet, when they approach politics, God is somehow quite separate from that. Or God is an escapist. And many of them, if they think about it, God would be a reflection of them. They would be escapists, escaping from marriages, escaping from going to college, escaping from participating in a lot of their parishes, escaping from the responsibilities of a person who's going out and trying to make something of themselves rather than being a click-clacktivist all day long. A lot of the people that talk that way are technocratic to the core. They almost wouldn't know what real life is if it hit them in the face. What, more realistically, is this mutation? This new man, rootless, discontinuous, a past destroyed. The free thinker and skeptic open, of course, to each new intellectual fashion because he himself has no intellectual foundation. The seeker after some new revelation, ready to believe anything new. Neophiles. They're neophiles. The glitter and glow. Constantly sniffing in the air for anything new. The planner and experimenter worshiping fact because he's abandoned truth, seeing the world as a vast laboratory in which he is free to determine what is possible. Autonomous man, full of the pride that expects everything to be given him in a world where nothing is authoritatively forbidden. A man of the moment without conscience or values, at the mercy of the strongest stimulus, the rebel, hating all restraint and authority because he himself is his own and only God. The mass man. This new barbarian, thoroughly reduced and simplified and capable of only the most elementary ideas, yet scornful of anyone at all who presumes to point out the higher things or the real complexity in life. These men, these people, are all one. The man whose fashioning has been the very purpose of nihilism. Do you know people like that? Do you sometimes feel like that yourself? Do you feel like have you suffered under the weight of free thought and skepticism? I have. In fact, I've been a whole bunch of these guys. A whole bunch of them. Free thinker and skeptic. Open, right, to each new intellectual fashion. Looking for something new. Looking for the newest data. Instead of taking it and saying, look, democracy of the dead has a point. We got to be careful. The planner and the experimenter worshiping fact, treating it like a laboratory. Oh yeah, we can manipulate. Everything is malleable. Everything, there's a kind of plasticity. We're able to mold it however we want, like Play-Doh or like some kind of silly putty, to make people and things exactly what we want. It's amazing what we can do. And yet, where's that moral compass that guides them through this all? Nowhere. So people are little more than stepping stones. Stepping stones to a nihilist throne that sits high atop an abyss. In other words, it's going down quick. Bloosh. Done. Sucked into the void. The black hole of that cesspool. To the Christian observer, and we'll end with this. To the Christian observer, man is no longer even a caricature of himself. He's no longer portrayed in the throes of spiritual death, ravaged by the hideous nihilism of our century that attacks not just the body and soul, but the very idea, the very nature of man. No. All of this has passed. The crisis is over. Man is dead. Selah. Think about this. Look round about you. There's a great deception going on. That great deception going on says, look at all the flutter. Look at all the flow. Everything in flux. Watch it all go. Watch it go. Building up steam all the time. And it seems like it's going somewhere. And it's picking up steam. So it's getting there quick. But we have the kind of foresight that we're able to recognize that at the end of that rail, is a cliff. They're just going faster and faster and faster to it, and they don't even know why. They're enjoying the wind in their hair. They're enjoying that feeling that your lips do, and they're laughing at each other, thinking, oh, it's kind of like the movies with people going to outer space, and they're like, wah! Doing that, and they're starting to feel. They're feeling like Dark Helmet from Spaceballs, right? He's going, so fast. And they're loving it. They love the smells. They love the feels, the tastes, the sounds. The senses are just lit up. The senses are lit up. And because it's constantly feeding into the dopamine, it's constantly feeding in to the serotonin, it just keeps shoveling that coal into the engine. More and more and more and more. Chugga, 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 chugga. Faster, faster, faster. Until finally, it's a civilization on the brink. And it's not abstract. We're talking people. We're talking institutions. We're talking traditions, customs, courtesies, art and architecture. We're talking core convictions. And I believe personally that every civilization has its time to die. I believe that these things are born, that there's a kind of lifespan. They reach a middle age and certain things start happening, and then it fades away. And tragically, so many of them end up falling into the abyss, not learning any lessons from history, in fact. Not learning, not recognizing, with the only hope being that when this happens over and over and over and over again, all around the globe, everywhere it's ever happened, everywhere, when this sort of thing happens and that civilization falls apart, there's hope. Because that core group of people that stood fast to the traditions, that stood fast to those customs and courtesies that were rooted in a Christian and Catholic culture, those have a bond. That bond is not torn apart like we were saying earlier about stretching and stretching till it's so thin that it finally starts snapping like thread. Just instead, it's strong because it's in the Lord. And because it's in the Lord, and because we have entrusted that to Him, following Him, making children, raising them in the fear of the Lord, raising them in church, raising them with the scriptures and the saints. Because those people will do that, they will not only survive, they will thrive. They will live to another day where each and every time these great civilizations have found themselves on the decline, balkanized into oblivion, those people crank it back up. And they begin with a high culture that has a kind of unity, a diversity, but not a diversity that is going to obliterate the oneness, and a unity amongst themselves that does not absorb the diversity among them, because it will be rooted in the Trinity. And I tell you how you'll know. I'll tell you. You'll see it in the skyline. You'll see it in the skyline. I sat over here. I'm like reaching over like, bah! Never again. Never ever again. My son. Oh. Yeah, goodness gracious alive. So yes, you'll see it in the skyline. You'll see it in those things. You'll see it in those things, right? That will be visible. They'll be tangible. There'll be things that kids can walk by and point and say, why is that there? And you'll have an awesome answer. Because Johnny Q and Sally Sue, sitting in those Catholic pews that were under attack when Satan and his minions were coming after them, they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and they stood their ground, standing fast on the fact that right now, Jesus is king. And he's not just king right now, he is king forever and ever and ever. Amen. Fact. End. Stand strong. That's why I said, be confident. Know that you are created, beautifully and wonderfully made, for just a time as this. Just a time as this. You have gifts and talents. How are you using them? What are you doing today? What vision do you have? What's your long-term goal? And how are you going to keep on track? If you haven't figured it out, pray. And if you don't know how, or you'd like to connect with other people, there's a bunch of links in the description below. I hope to see you on the flip side. In fact, I'm going over there right now. Over to the Wolfpack chat. We're going to have ourselves a live chat. Until next time, never give up, keep on smiling, and memento mori.
I wanted to make people dream bigger thoughts.